How to Cure Melancholy in 14 Days. When I started writing this book, I offered a $200 prize for the most helpful and inspiring true story on how I conquered worry. The three judges for this contest were Eddie Rickenbacker, President, Eastern Airlines; Dr. Stewart W. McClelland, President, Lincoln Memorial University; H.V. Kaltenborn, Radio News Analyst. However, we received two stories so superb that the judges found it impossible to choose between them. So we divided the prize. Here is one of the stories that tied for first prize: the story of C.R. Burton, who works for Whizzer Motor Sales of Missouri Incorporated, 1067 Commercial Street, Springfield, Missouri.
I lost my mother when I was 9 years old, and my father when I was 12, Mr. Burton wrote me. My father was killed, but my mother simply walked out of the house one day 19 years ago, and I have never seen her since. Neither have I ever seen my two little sisters that she took with her. She never even wrote me a letter until after she had been gone 7 years. My father was killed in an accident 3 years after Mother left. He and a partner bought a cafe in a small Missouri town, and while father was away on a business trip, his partner sold the cafe for cash and skipped out. A friend wired father to hurry back home, and in his hurry, father was killed in a car accident at Salinas, Kansas. Two of my father's sisters, who were poor and old and sick, took 3 of the children into their homes. Nobody wanted me and my little brother. We were left at the mercy of the town. We were haunted by the fear of being called orphans and treated as orphans. Our fears soon materialized, too.
I lived for a little while with a poor family in town. But times were hard and the head of the family lost his job, so they couldn't afford to feed me any longer. Then Mr. and Mrs. Lofton took me to live with them on their farm 11 miles from town. Mr. Lofton was 70 years old, and sick in bed with shingles. He told me I could stay there, as long as I didn't lie, didn't steal, and did as I was told. Those 3 orders became my Bible. I lived by them strictly. I started to school, but the first week found me at home, bawling like a baby. The other children picked on me and poked fun at my big nose and said I was dumb and called me an orphan brat. I was hurt so badly that I wanted to fight them, but Mr. Lofton, the farmer who had taken me in, said to me, "Always remember that it takes a bigger man to walk away from a fight than it does to stay and fight." I didn't fight until one day a kid picked up some chicken manure from the schoolhouse yard and threw it in my face. I beat the hell out of him, and made a couple of friends. They said he had it coming to him.
I was proud of a new cap that Mrs. Lofton had bought me. One day one of the big girls jerked it off my head and filled it with water and ruined it. She said she filled it with water so that the water would wet my thick skull and keep my popcorn brains from popping. I never cried at school, but I used to bawl it out at home. Then one day Mrs. Lofton gave me some advice that did away with all troubles and worries and turned my enemies into friends. She said, "Ralph, they won't tease you and call you an orphan brat anymore if you will get interested in them and see how much you can do for them." I took her advice. I studied hard, and I soon headed the class. I was never envied because I went out of my way to help them.
I helped several of the boys write their themes and essays. I wrote complete debates for some of the boys. One lad was ashamed to let his folks know that I was helping him. So he used to tell his mother he was going possum hunting. Then he would come to Mr. Lofton's farm and tie his dogs up in the barn while I helped him with his lessons. I wrote book reviews for one lad and spent several evenings helping one of the girls on her maths. Death struck our neighborhood. 2 elderly farmers died and one woman was deserted by her husband. I was the only male in 4 families. I helped these widows for 2 years. On my way to and from school, I stopped at their farms, cut wood for them, milked their cows, and fed and watered their stock. I was now blessed instead of cursed. I was accepted as a friend by everyone. They showed their real feelings when I returned home from the Navy. More than 200 farmers came to see me the first day I was home. Some of them drove as far as 80 miles, and their concern for me was really sincere. Because I have been busy and happy trying to help other people, I have few worries, and I haven't been called an orphan brat now for 13 years.
Hooray for C.R. Burton. He knows how to win friends. And he also knows how to conquer worry and enjoy life. So did the late Dr. Frank Loop, of Seattle, Washington. He was an invalid for 23 years. Arthritis. Yet Stuart Whithouse of the Seattle Star wrote me, saying, I interviewed Dr. Loop many times, and I have never known a man more unselfish or a man who got more out of life. How did this bedridden invalid get so much out of life? I'll give you 2 guesses. Did he do it by complaining and criticizing? No, by wallowing in self-pity and demanding that he be the center of attention and everyone cater to him? No, still wrong. He did it by adopting as his slogan the motto of the Prince of Wales, Ich dien I serve. He accumulated the names and addresses of other invalids and cheered both them and himself by writing happy, encouraging letters. In fact, he organized a letter-writing club for invalids and got them writing letters to one another. Finally, he formed a national organization called the Shut-In Society.
As he lay in bed, he wrote an average of 1,400 letters a year and brought joy to thousands of invalids by getting radios and books for shut-ins. What was the chief difference between Dr. Loop and a lot of other people? Just this: Dr. Loop had the inner glow of a man with a purpose, a mission. He had the joy of knowing that he was being used by an idea far nobler and more significant than himself, instead of being, as Shaw put it, a self-centered, little clod of ailments and grievances complaining that the world would not devote itself to making him happy. Here is the most astonishing statement that I ever read from the pen of a great psychiatrist. This statement was made by Alfred Adler. He used to say to his melancholia patients, "You can be cured in 14 days if you follow this prescription. Try to think every day how you can please someone." That statement sounds so incredible that I feel I ought to try to explain it by quoting a couple of pages from Dr. Adler's splendid book, What Life Should Mean to You. Asterisk, by the way, there is a book you ought to read.
Melancholia, says Adler in What Life Should Mean to You, is like a long-continued rage and reproach against others, though for the purpose of gaining care, sympathy, and support, the patient seems only to be dejected about his own guilt. A melancholiac's first memory is generally something like this: I remember I wanted to lie on the couch, but my brother was lying there. I cried so much that he had to leave. Melancholiacs are often inclined to revenge themselves by committing suicide, and the doctor's first care is to avoid giving them an excuse for suicide. I myself try to relieve the whole tension by proposing to them, as the first rule in treatment, never do anything you don't like. This seems to be very modest, but I believe that it goes to the root of the whole trouble. If a melancholiac is able to do anything he wants, whom can he accuse? What has he got to revenge himself for? If you want to go to the theater, I tell him, or to go on a holiday, do it. If you find on the way that you don't want to, stop it. It is the best situation anyone could be in. It gives a satisfaction to his striving for superiority. He is like God and can do what he pleases. On the other hand, it does not fit very easily into his style of life. He wants to dominate and accuse others, and if they agree with him there is no way of dominating them. This rule is a great relief, and I have never had a suicide among my patients.
Generally, the patient replies, "But there is nothing I like doing." I have prepared for this answer, because I have heard it so often. Then refrain from doing anything you dislike, I say. Sometimes, however, he will reply, "I should like to stay in bed all day." I know that, if I allow it, he will no longer want to do it. I know that, if I hinder him, he will start a war. I always agree. This is one rule. Another attacks their style of life more directly. I tell them, "You can be cured in 14 days if you follow this prescription. Try to think every day how you can please someone." See what this means to them. They are occupied with the thought. How can I worry someone? The answers are very interesting. Some say, this will be very easy for me. I have done it all my life. They have never done it. I ask them to think it over. They do not think it over. I tell them, you can make use of all the time you spend when you are unable to go to sleep by thinking how you can please someone, and it will be a big step forward in your health. When I see them next day, I ask them, did you think over what I suggested? They answer, last night I went to sleep as soon as I got to bed. All this must be done, of course, in a modest, friendly manner, without a hint of superiority.
Others will answer, I could never do it. I am so worried. I tell them, don't stop worrying, but at the same time you can think now and then of others. I want to direct their interest always towards their fellows. Many say, why should I please others? Others do not try to please me. You must think of your health, I answer. The others will suffer later on. It is extremely rare that I have found a patient who said, I have thought over what you suggested. All my efforts are devoted towards increasing the social interest of the patient. I know that the real reason for his malady is his lack of cooperation, and I want him to see it too. As soon